I'm Amber, 32 years old, and a kindergarten teacher from Denver. Life with Jackson has been wonderful for the past 5 years, and initially his mother Sandra welcomed me with open arms. She even insisted I call her Mum instead of Mrs. Thompson. Everything changed when I got pregnant. I still remember her exact words, "Never call me your mother again." The shock and pain I felt in that moment still haunts me, but what she never expected was how I would respond to her rejection. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear how I handled this heartbreaking situation. Jackson and I met at our mutual friend Tyler's barbecue 7 years ago. It was one of those perfect summer evenings with string lights hanging in the backyard, the smell of grilled burgers in the air, and laughter floating around us. I noticed Jackson immediately. He was tall with kind eyes and a smile that lit up his entire face. When Tyler introduced us, there was an instant connection. "Amber teaches kindergarten," Tyler said. Jackson just finished his architecture degree. Our conversation flowed effortlessly that night. We talked about everything from our favorite books to our dreams for the future. By the end of the evening, Jackson asked for my number and I gave it to him without hesitation. Our romance was a whirlwind. Within 3 months, we were practically inseparable. Jackson was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. He was thoughtful, intelligent, and made me laugh until my sides hurt. When he told me he wanted me to meet his mother, I was nervous, but excited. "She's going to love you," he assured me. "She's been asking about you non-stop." Sandra lived in a beautiful Victorian house in the suburbs. When we arrived, she opened the door with a warm smile and immediately pulled me into a hug. "So this is the woman who's stolen my son's heart," she said, holding my hands and looking me over with approval. Come in, I've prepared Jackson's favourite meal." That first dinner was perfect. Sandra had gone all out with a 3-course meal. She served pot roast with roasted potatoes and vegetables, fresh baked bread, and homemade apple pie for dessert. Throughout dinner, she shared stories about Jackson as a child. How he built elaborate structures with his building blocks. How he once designed and built a treehouse when he was just 12 years old. "He was always so creative," Sandra said, her eyes shining with pride. "I knew he would become an architect from the time he was little." As the evening was winding down, I thanked her for dinner. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Thompson," I said. She waved her hand dismissively. "Please call me Mom. Mrs. Thompson makes me sound so old, and I have a feeling you're going to be part of the family soon." I remember feeling so touched by her words. It seemed like I had not only found the love of my life, but also gained a second mother. When Jackson proposed 6 months later, Sandra was the first person we called. She squealed with delight and immediately started talking about wedding plans. The wedding planning began, and Sandra appeared incredibly helpful at first. She had connections with florists, caterers, and venue owners. But as time went on, I noticed she had very specific ideas about how everything should be. "Sweetheart, I think ivory would be better than white for the linens," she would say. Or, "Those flowers won't photograph well. Let's go with roses instead." When I suggested a beach ceremony, Sandra frowned. "The Thompson family has always gotten married in churches," she said firmly. "It's tradition." I tried to compromise where I could. We chose a beautiful church with stained glass windows, but kept my beach-inspired colour scheme of blues and sandy neutrals. Looking back, I should have recognised these as the first signs of Sandra's controlling nature, but I was so eager to be accepted by Jackson's family that I overlooked them. Our wedding day was beautiful despite a few last-minute changes Sandra had made without consulting me. When she hugged me at the reception, there were tears in her eyes. "You look beautiful," she said. "I'm so happy Jackson found you. You're the daughter I never had." Those words meant everything to me. Having grown up with only my father after my mother passed away when I was 15, I had longed for that maternal connection. Our first holiday as a married couple was Thanksgiving at Sandra's house. After dinner, she presented me with a small velvet box. "This bracelet has been in the Thompson family for generations," she said, as I opened it to reveal a delicate silver charm bracelet. "My mother gave it to me, and now I'm giving it to you." As she fastened it around my wrist, I truly felt like I had been accepted into the family. I had no idea that 3 years later I would be returning that bracelet in an act of self-preservation. After our first anniversary, Jackson and I bought our first home. It was a charming craftsman-style house with a wraparound porch and a big backyard. It needed some work, but Jackson's architecture background and my eye for design made us the perfect team to renovate it. The house was about 30 minutes from Sandra's, which seemed like the perfect distance. Close enough for regular visits, but far enough to maintain our independence. At least that's what I thought. The first week after we moved in, Sandra showed up unannounced with several casseroles to stock your freezer. It was a thoughtful gesture and I appreciated it. But then she started reorganizing my kitchen cabinets. "You have everything in the wrong place, dear," she said as she moved the glasses from one cabinet to another. "This makes much more sense." I bit my tongue. She was just trying to help, I told myself. But the unannounced visits continued. Sandra would drop by at least 3 times a week, always with some excuse. She brought food household items we might need, or simply came to check on you two. Each time she would find something to rearrange or comment on. "These curtains are too dark for this room, Amber. You should move this table to the other wall. Is this how you fold towels? Let me show you the proper way." The boundary issues didn't stop at decor. Sandra had opinions about everything. How often we should clean the gutters. What brand of laundry detergent was best. She even commented on our bedroom furniture when she accidentally wandered upstairs. "Mum, we've got this under control," Jackson would occasionally say, but he mostly brushed off my concerns when I brought them up privately. "That's just how she shows love," he would explain with a shrug. "She likes taking care of people." One evening, I decided to cook a special dinner for Jackson. I spent hours preparing his favorite meal steak with mushroom sauce, twice-baked potatoes, and chocolate lava cake for dessert. Just as we were sitting down to eat, Sandra knocked on the door. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by," she said, walking in without waiting for an invitation. She looked at the table and frowned slightly. "Oh, you're cooking for my boy, how sweet." Throughout dinner, she made subtle comments about the food. "The steak is a bit overdone, don't you think? Jackson has always preferred his medium rare. My mushroom sauce recipe includes white wine. It really brings out the flavor." By dessert, I was fighting back tears. What was meant to be a romantic evening had turned into another opportunity for Sandra to criticize me. These incidents became more frequent. Sandra's criticism extended beyond our home and into every aspect of our lives. She had opinions about my clothes, my job, even my friends. We hosted a dinner party for some of Jackson's colleagues from the architecture firm. I had spent days planning the menu and setting a beautiful table. When Sandra arrived early to help, she immediately began rearranging the table settings. "Amber, the salad fork goes on the outside, not the inside," she said loudly enough for our early arriving guests to hear. I felt my face flush with embarrassment. "I think either way is fine for an informal dinner," I said quietly. "Well, if you want to do things incorrectly, that's your choice," she replied with a tight smile. After that dinner party, I started noticing a pattern. Sandra was perfectly pleasant when Jackson was in the room, but the moment he stepped away, her demeanor changed. The criticism became more pointed, the comments more cutting. She began calling me daily with helpful advice. "I noticed your garden is looking a bit neglected. Should I come over and show you how to properly prune those roses? Jackson mentioned you're teaching the children about dinosaurs this week. I found some resources that might be better than what you're using." I confided in my friend Tara about the situation over coffee one Saturday morning. "It sounds like she's jealous," Tara said after listening to my latest Sandra story. Jealous of me. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Think about it. Jackson is her only child, and you're now the most important woman in his life. Some mothers have a hard time with that transition. Tara's words made sense, but understanding Sandra's behavior didn't make it any easier to deal with. Things came to a head when I finally gathered the courage to set a small boundary. After Sandra had shown up at 7:30 a.m. on a Saturday to help us with yard work, I asked her to please call before visiting. "We're adults with busy lives," I explained as gently as possible. "Sometimes we're not prepared for visitors." Sandra's face hardened. "I didn't realize I needed an appointment to see my own son." "That's not what I meant," I tried to explain. "We just appreciate a heads up, that's all." "I see," she said coldly. "Well, I wouldn't want to impose." She left abruptly, and for the next week she called Jackson daily to tell him how hurt she was by my restrictions. Jackson tried to mediate, but it was clear he was uncomfortable being caught in the middle. Little did I know this was just the beginning of the storm that was coming. After 2 years of marriage, Jackson and I decided we were ready to start trying for a baby. We both wanted children, and the timing felt right. Jackson had been promoted at his architecture firm, and my position at the elementary school was secure. We were financially stable and emotionally ready for this next chapter. I made the mistake of mentioning our decision to Sandra during a family dinner. "That's wonderful news," she exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "I've been waiting to be a grandmother since the day you two got married." From that moment on, every conversation with Sandra somehow circled back to my potential pregnancy. At every family gathering, she would pull me aside to ask if there was any news. When I said no, she would pat my hand sympathetically. "It will happen when it's meant to happen," she would say, but her tone suggested otherwise. After 8 months of trying without success, I was already feeling stressed and disappointed. Sandra's constant questioning only added to the pressure. "Have you been taking prenatal vitamins?" she asked during one Sunday dinner. "Yes, Sandra," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "And you're tracking your cycle, right? My friend Barbara's daughter got pregnant right away once she started using one of those apps." "We're doing everything we should be doing," I assured her, feeling Jackson squeeze my hand under the table. But Sandra wasn't satisfied. She began sending me articles about fertility-boosting foods and exercises. She suggested special teas and supplements. She even gave me a book titled Fertility After 30, What You Need to Know. I was only 29. One afternoon, I stopped by Sandra's house to drop off a birthday gift for her. She was on the phone in the kitchen and didn't hear me come in. As I approached, I overheard her conversation. "I don't know if she can give Jackson children," Sandra was saying in a hushed tone. "They've been trying for months now with no luck. I worry that he made the wrong choice if he wants to be a father." I froze the gift bag dangling from my fingers. The casual cruelty of her words sliced through me. I quietly backed out of the house and sat in my car, tears streaming down my face. When I told Jackson what I had overheard, he was upset but still hesitant to confront his mother directly. "She's just concerned," he said, though I could see the conflict in his eyes. "She doesn't mean any harm." I suggested we both get fertility testing done, mostly to put my own mind at ease. The results showed nothing wrong with either of us. The doctor assured us that it sometimes takes healthy couples a year or more to conceive. "Just keep trying and try to relax," he advised. "Stress can actually make conception more difficult." But relaxing was impossible with Sandra's constant pressure. She began talking about all the things she would do as a grandmother before I was even pregnant. "I'll take the baby every weekend to give you two a break," she announced over dinner one night. "And of course, I'll be in the delivery room." I was there when my sister had her children, so I know exactly what to do. I exchanged a look with Jackson. We hadn't discussed any of these things yet, and here was Sandra making plans for a child that didn't even exist. Even more hurtful was when Sandra began bringing up Jackson's ex-girlfriend Lauren, who had recently had a baby with her husband. "Lauren just had her second child," Sandra mentioned casually while we were having coffee at her house. "She always wanted a big family. She would have made a wonderful mother to Jackson's children." The comment hung in the air between us. I didn't know how to respond, so I said nothing. But inside, I was crumbling. The stress of trying to conceive combined with Sandra's constant interference was taking a toll on my mental health. I started seeing a therapist to help me cope with the anxiety and feelings of inadequacy that had begun to plague me. Dr. Morris, my therapist, helped me understand that Sandra's behavior was about her own insecurities, not my worth as a woman or potential mother. "You can't control Sandra," she told me, "but you can control how you respond to her and the boundaries you set." I worked on strengthening those boundaries and communicating more openly with Jackson about how his mother's behavior was affecting me. Slowly, he began to see the pattern of manipulation that I had been dealing with. And then after trying for just over a year, I saw those 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. I was elated, but also nervous. I wanted to wait until the end of the first trimester to tell people, as I knew the risk of miscarriage was highest in those first 12 weeks. "Can we keep this between us for now?" I asked Jackson after showing him the positive test. "Just until we pass the 12-week mark," Jackson agreed, though I could tell he was bursting to share the news. We decided to tell our families after my first ultrasound at 8 weeks, but to ask them to keep it quiet until we were ready for a public announcement. I had no idea that this simple, reasonable request would lead to the biggest confrontation with Sandra yet. The day I found out I was pregnant was one of the happiest of my life. Jackson and I celebrated quietly at home with sparkling cider and a special dinner. We talked about names, nursery colours, and all the hopes we had for our child. It was a perfect, intimate moment between the two of us. I was about 6 weeks along and had my first prenatal appointment scheduled for the following week. We decided that after we heard the heartbeat and confirmed everything was on track, we would tell our immediate family, but asked them to keep the news private until I reached the 12-week mark. The only person I told outside of Jackson was my sister Emma. She had been through 2 pregnancies herself, and I needed her advice on managing morning sickness, which had hit me hard. "I won't tell a soul," Emma promised when I swore her to secrecy. But a few days later, Emma accidentally let the news slip to our mother during a family dinner that I couldn't attend because I wasn't feeling well. I hope Amber feels better soon. The morning sickness must be rough, she said without thinking. My mother, of course, was thrilled but also hurt that I hadn't told her myself. She called me immediately after dinner. Why didn't you tell me you're expecting? She asked, her voice a mixture of excitement and disappointment. I explained our plan to wait, and though she was understanding, the damage was done. The news began to travel through the family grapevine, and within days it reached Sandra. I was grading papers at the kitchen table when I heard the screech of tires in our driveway. Looking out the window, I saw Sandra's car parked at an odd angle, and she was already storming up to our front door. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by aggressive knocking. Amber, I know you're in there. Open this door right now. I opened the door and Sandra pushed past me into the house. Is it true? She demanded, her face flushed with anger. Are you pregnant? I was taken aback by her hostility. This should have been a moment of joy and celebration. Yes, I said carefully. We just found out, but we were waiting to tell everyone until after the first trimester. For safety reasons. Safety reasons, Sandra scoffed. You deliberately kept me in the dark about my own grandchild. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to hear this news from Barbara at my book club? Barbara, whose daughter is friends with your cousin. I'm sorry you found out that way, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. But we weren't ready to share the news with anyone yet. We haven't even had our first ultrasound. That's ridiculous, Sandra snapped. I'm not just anyone. I'm the baby's grandmother. I have a right to know immediately. With all due respect, Sandra, this is our pregnancy and our decision about when to share the news. That's when Sandra really lost her temper. You've always tried to keep Jackson away from me, she accused, her voice rising. First with the house that's conveniently too far for me to visit easily, then with your rules about calling before coming over, and now this, keeping my grandchild a secret. That's not true, I protested. We just wanted to wait until we were past the highest risk period. 1 in 4 pregnancies ends in miscarriage during the first trimester. But Sandra wasn't listening. She was pacing back and forth in our living room, working herself into a greater fury with each step. You're manipulative, that's what you are, she continued. Selfish and manipulative. You want Jackson and the baby all to yourself. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. This was so far from the reaction I had hoped for when we eventually shared our news. Sandra, please try to understand. This wasn't about excluding you. We weren't telling anyone yet. Don't lie to me. Your family knew. Your sister knew. Everyone but me. At that moment, Jackson walked in the front door. He had been at a job site and wasn't expected home for another hour. The raised voices must have alarmed him because he rushed into the living room. What's going on here? He asked, looking between his mother and me. Your wife has been keeping secrets, Sandra said before I could speak. She's pregnant and didn't bother to tell me. Jackson came to stand beside me, putting his arm around my shoulders. Mom, we were waiting to tell everyone until after the first trimester. That was my decision too, not just Amber's. Sandra looked betrayed. You were in on this, keeping me out of the loop about my own grandchild. It's not about keeping you out of anything, Jackson tried to explain. It's standard practice to wait. We were being cautious. Cautious or ashamed. Sandra's words cut through the room. Are you embarrassed by your family, Jackson? Is that it? Has she turned you against me? That's enough, Mom, Jackson said firmly. Nobody has turned me against you. You're overreacting to what should be happy news. Sandra's face crumpled and she began to cry. Not gentle tears, but dramatic sobs that shook her entire body. I feel so replaced, she wailed. Forgotten. I thought we were close, Jackson. I thought I meant something to you. Jackson's resolve weakened visibly. He had always been susceptible to his mother's tears. Of course you mean something to me, he said, his voice softer. You're my mother. Nothing will ever change that. Sandra looked up, her mascara smeared beneath her eyes. For a moment, I thought the crisis had been averted. But then she turned to me, her expression hardening again. This is all you're doing, she said in a low, venomous voice. You've turned my son against me from the day you met him. That's not true, I whispered, feeling Jackson's arm tighten around me. Never call me your mother again, Sandra spat out. You're just the woman who trapped my son. The room fell silent. The words hung in the air like poison. Mom, Jackson said in shock. You don't mean that. But Sandra was already grabbing her purse, already moving toward the door. When you come to your senses, Jackson, you know where to find me, without her." And with that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her so hard that the picture frames on the wall rattled. I collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down my face. Jackson sat beside me looking shell-shocked. "She didn't mean it," he said automatically. "She's just upset. She'll calm down." But I knew better. I had seen the truth in Sandra's eyes. This wasn't a momentary outburst. This was how she really felt about me. And now with a baby on the way, I had to decide what to do about it. The days following Sandra's outburst were some of the most difficult of my life. I fluctuated between crying spells and anxiety attacks, worried about how the stress was affecting the baby. Jackson tried his best to comfort me, but he was torn between his loyalty to me and his lifelong bond with his mother. "She'll come around," he kept saying. "Just give her time to process everything." But a week passed and Sandra made no attempt to apologize or even contact us. Jackson tried calling her several times, but she either let it go to voicemail or hung up when she heard his voice. During my 8-week checkup, my doctor noticed my elevated blood pressure and the dark circles under my eyes. "Is everything okay at home, Amber?" Dr. Chen asked with concern after we had heard the baby's heartbeat, a moment that should have been purely joyful. I broke down and told her about the situation with Sandra. Dr. Chen listened sympathetically, then became very serious. "Stress can have real effects on your pregnancy," she warned. "High blood pressure in particular can lead to complications like preeclampsia. For your baby's sake and your own, you need to find a way to manage this situation." Her words terrified me. I had wanted this baby for so long. The idea that my stress could harm my child was unbearable. That evening, I suggested to Jackson that we try family counseling to resolve the issues with his mother. "I don't think she'd ever agree to that," Jackson said doubtfully. "Then maybe just you and I should go," I suggested, to figure out how to handle the situation in a united way. Jackson reluctantly agreed, and we scheduled an appointment with a family therapist for the following week. Dr. Martinez, our therapist, helped us see that Sandra's behavior fit a pattern of emotional manipulation that had been present throughout Jackson's life. "Your mother appears to have some narcissistic tendencies," Dr. Martinez explained to Jackson. "She sees you as an extension of herself rather than as an independent person with your own family and priorities." Jackson was defensive at first. "She's just protective. She's been that way since my dad died when I was 10. "There's a difference between protection and control," Dr. Martinez pointed out gently, "and her treatment of Amber crosses that line." Over several sessions, Jackson began to recognize the unhealthy patterns in his relationship with his mother, how she would use guilt to get her way, how she would create crises that required his immediate attention, how she would undermine his independence at every turn. Meanwhile, Sandra had begun reaching out to Jackson again, but only when she knew he would be at work and unable to answer. She would leave tearful voicemails about how much she missed him and how hurt she was that he had chosen to abandon her. When Jackson suggested that the three of us sit down together to talk things through, Sandra refused. Instead, she sent Jackson alone with a list of demands for how things would proceed once the baby was born. Jackson returned from this meeting looking defeated. "She wants us to split all holidays between her house and yours. She wants guaranteed time with the baby every week without you present. She says she can't be herself around you anymore." I felt as though I'd been punched in the stomach. "And what did you say?" "I told her I'd discuss it with you, but that we're a package deal. If she wants to see the baby, you'll be there too." Despite Jackson's words, I could see he was wavering. The pull of his mother's emotional manipulation was strong, reinforced by a lifetime of giving in to avoid conflict. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about Sandra's demands and what they would mean for our future. I imagined years of power struggles with our child caught in the middle. I thought about holidays ruined by drama, about Sandra undermining my parenting decisions, about the constant stress of navigating her moods and manipulations. And suddenly, with perfect clarity, I knew what I had to do. Not just for myself, but for my child and for Jackson too. The next morning, I asked Jackson to sit down with me for a serious conversation. "I've been thinking about your mother's demands," I began. "They're just suggestions," Jackson said quickly. "We don't have to agree to any of it." "It's not about the specific demands," I explained. "It's about the pattern. Your mother has never respected our boundaries, and that's not going to change when the baby comes. In fact, it will probably get worse." Jackson looked down at his hands. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that for the health of our baby and the sake of our marriage, we need to set firm boundaries with your mother. And if she can't respect them, then we need to limit our contact with her until she can." "You want me to cut off my own mother?" Jackson looked horrified. "Not forever," I assured him. just until she can understand that her behavior is harmful and agree to change it. I'm not asking you to choose between us, Jackson. I'm asking you to choose what's healthy for our family, for our child. Tears filled Jackson's eyes. I don't know if I can do that. I reached for his hand. Think about it this way. If we don't address this now, what kind of relationship will our child have with Sandra? Do you want our son or daughter to grow up watching their grandmother undermine and belittle their mother? Do you want them to think that's normal? We talked for hours. Jackson shared stories from his childhood times when his mother's controlling behavior had made him feel smothered and insecure. I talked about my fears for our child's emotional well-being if they were exposed to the same dynamics. Finally, Jackson nodded slowly. You're right, he said. It's not healthy, but cutting her off completely seems so extreme. What if we write her a letter? I suggested. Explaining our boundaries clearly and the consequences if she violates them. We can offer her a path back into our lives if she's willing to respect our rules and maybe even attend counselling with us. Jackson thought about it for a moment, then agreed. That seems fair. She gets to make a choice about whether she wants to be in our lives on healthy terms. That night we drafted the letter together. It was one of the hardest things I've ever written, but also one of the most necessary. The letter to Sandra took us 3 drafts to get right. We wanted to be clear about our boundaries without being cruel, firm, without being punitive. In the end, this is what we wrote. Dear Sandra, we are writing this letter with heavy hearts, but clear minds. The events of the past few weeks have made it evident that we need to address some serious issues in our family dynamic. When you said, never call me your mother again, and referred to me as just the woman who trapped your son, it revealed feelings that cannot be ignored. Those words hurt deeply, but more importantly, they showed a fundamental lack of respect for me as Jackson's wife and the mother of your future grandchild. We want you to be part of our lives and our child's life, but that can only happen under certain conditions. 1, you must treat both of us with respect at all times. Disagreements are normal in families, but personal attacks and accusations are not acceptable. 2, you need to recognize and respect our boundaries. This includes calling before visiting, accepting our decisions about our child without undermining us, and understanding that we are a unit. Attempts to separate us or create divisions will not be tolerated. 3, we would like you to consider attending family counselling with us. We believe this would help all of us communicate better and build a healthier relationship moving forward. Until these conditions are met, we have made the difficult decision to limit our contact with you. This is not a punishment, but a necessary step to protect our mental health and the well-being of our growing family. We are enclosing the family bracelet you gave me after our wedding. You said it was meant to be passed down to a woman who was truly part of the Thompson family. It seems clear that you no longer see me in that light, and I cannot in good conscience keep it under these circumstances. We hope that you will reflect on these issues and consider what kind of relationship you want with us and your grandchild. We remain open to reconciliation when you are ready to move forward in a healthy way, with hope for the future. Jackson and Amber. Jackson read the letter one last time before we sealed it in an envelope, along with the silver charm bracelet. Are you sure about this? He asked, his voice strained. I nodded. It's the right thing to do, for all of us. Jackson delivered the letter to Sandra's house the next morning. He left it in her mailbox, not wanting to risk another confrontation. We didn't have to wait long for her response. That afternoon, Sandra called Jackson sobbing hysterically. He put the phone on speaker so I could hear. How could you do this to me? She cried. After everything I've done for you, I gave you life. I raised you alone after your father died, and this is how you repay me, by choosing her over your own mother. Mum, that's not what's happening, Jackson tried to explain. We're asking for respect and healthy boundaries, that's all. She's poisoned you against me, Sandra continued as if he hadn't spoken. She's jealous of our relationship. She wants to control you. Jackson caught my eye, recognition dawning on his face. These were the same accusations Sandra had made about me, but they better described her own behavior. Mom, we're not going to discuss this further unless you're willing to address the real issues, Jackson said firmly. The letter explained everything. If you want to be part of our lives, you know what needs to change. Fine, Sandra snapped. If that's how you want it, don't expect me to come crawling back. You'll regret this, Jackson. Both of you will. Joe. She hung up and Jackson let out a long breath. That went about as well as expected. The following days brought a barrage of calls and texts from extended family members. Sandra had apparently embarked on a campaign to paint me as the villain who had torn apart her family. Jackson's Aunt Marjorie called to tell him he was breaking his mother's heart. His cousin Patrick suggested that pregnancy hormones were making me irrational and Jackson should ride it out until after the baby was born. Through it all, Jackson remained steadfast. He patiently explained to each relative that this was a mutual decision based on a pattern of behaviour, not a whim or a temporary conflict. My parents stepped in to support us, inviting us over for dinners and helping us prepare the nursery. My father, who had raised me largely on his own after my mother's death, had a particularly good talk with Jackson about setting boundaries with family while still honouring those relationships. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable, he told Jackson. It's not about punishment, it's about not enabling harmful behaviour. As my pregnancy progressed, we settled into a new normal. Jackson missed his mother, but agreed that the reduced stress was better for me and the baby. My blood pressure returned to normal levels, and I began to enjoy my pregnancy instead of worrying constantly about the next confrontation. Sandra's direct attacks eventually subsided, but she found more subtle ways to try to work her way back into our lives, Bassans, without actually meeting our conditions. She sent a package of baby clothes with a note that read, Just because we're having a disagreement doesn't mean I don't love my grandchild. There was no acknowledgement of her behaviour, no apology, just an attempt to bypass our boundaries with gifts and emotional appeals. I donated the baby clothes to a local women's shelter and sent Sandra a polite thank you note with a photo of the donation receipt. Your gift will help mothers and babies in need, I wrote. Thank you for your generosity. It was my way of maintaining boundaries while still acknowledging her gesture. As my due date approached, we prepared for the possibility that Sandra might try to insert herself into the birth. We notified the hospital of the situation and provided them with a list of approved visitors. We also arranged for my sister to act as an additional support person, partly to help with the birth and partly to run interference if Sandra showed up. Despite our precautions, Sandra did indeed appear at the hospital when I went into labour. Somehow she had found out I had been admitted, likely through one of Jackson's relatives. She arrived bearing flowers and acting as though nothing had happened, attempting to walk right into the delivery room. I'm the grandmother, she told the nurse at the desk. I should be in there. Thankfully, the hospital staff were prepared and firm. I'm sorry, but you're not on the approved visitors list, the nurse explained. Sandra created a scene in the waiting room, demanding to see Jackson and accusing the hospital of violating her grandparent rights. Security was called and she was escorted from the building, shouting that we couldn't keep her from her grandchild forever. Through it all, Jackson remained by my side, holding my hand through contractions and whispering words of encouragement. After 18 hours of labour, our daughter Lily entered the world 7 pounds 3 ounces of perfect pink-cheeked miracle. As Jackson placed her in my arms for the first time, I knew with absolute certainty that we had made the right decision. This precious child deserved to grow up in a home filled with respect and healthy boundaries, not manipulation and control. She's perfect, Jackson whispered, tears streaming down his face. And so are you. In that moment, exhausted but elated, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in months. We were a family, we were strong, and we would protect our daughter from toxic relationships no matter who they came from. The first 6 months of Lily's life passed in a blur of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and the indescribable joy of watching our daughter discover the world. Sandra made no further attempts to contact us directly after being removed from the hospital, though we occasionally heard updates about her through family members. Jackson's Aunt Marjorie, who had initially been critical of our decision, began to see things differently after witnessing Sandra's behaviour at a family wedding. She spent the entire reception talking about how ungrateful you are and how she's been cruelly cut off from her only grandchild, Marjorie told Jackson during a phone call. It was uncomfortable for everyone. I'm starting to understand why you needed some distance. While these reports confirmed we had made the right decision, Jackson still struggled with the absence of his mother in our lives. On Lily's first Christmas, he became especially quiet while watching my parents dote on their granddaughter. I wish things could be different, he admitted that night after we had put Lily to bed. I wish she could just accept you and respect our boundaries. I wish that too, I said sincerely. Not just for us, but for Lily. She should know her grandmother. We had just started discussing whether we should reach out to Sandra again when she made the first move. Jackson received a text from her one evening. I saw photos of Lily on Facebook. She looks like you did as a baby. I miss you both. It was the first message that didn't include accusations or demands. Just a simple expression of loss. Jackson showed me the text, his expression hopeful. Should I respond? I took a deep breath. Maybe. but let's be careful not to rush back into the same patterns. Jackson replied with a simple message, "Thank you, she's growing so fast." This opened a cautious exchange of texts. Sandra sent more messages about missing Jackson and wanting to meet her granddaughter. She didn't mention me at all, which was concerning, but not surprising. After several weeks of this limited communication, Sandra began sending longer, more emotional texts. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I know I made mistakes. Please give me a chance to make things right." Jackson and I discussed these messages extensively. We were both wary of Sandra's sudden change of heart, but also hopeful that genuine reflection might have occurred during our months apart. "Maybe we should try a neutral meeting," Jackson suggested. "Somewhere public with clear time limits." I agreed, but before we could arrange anything, Jackson's Aunt Paula called with an unexpected proposal. Paula had always been the family peacemaker and had maintained relationships with both us and Sandra throughout the estrangement. "Sandra has been talking to me about the situation," Paula explained. "She seems genuinely regretful, though she's struggling to admit she was wrong. Would you be open to me mediating a conversation between you three? I promise to step in if things start going sideways." After careful consideration, we agreed. The meeting was arranged at Paula's house on a Sunday afternoon. I was nervous, but determined to approach the conversation with an open mind. When we arrived, Sandra was already there, sitting stiffly on Paula's couch. She looked older somehow, the lines around her mouth deeper than I remembered. When she saw Jackson, her face lit up, but when her eyes moved to me, her expression became guarded. "Thank you both for coming," Paula began once we were all seated. "I think we all want the same thing here, a healthy relationship that includes everyone, especially little Lily." Sandra nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Before we discuss moving forward," Paula continued, "I think it's important to acknowledge what led to the separation in the first place. Sandra, would you like to share your perspective?" Sandra took a deep breath. "I felt excluded," she said, her voice tight. "Cut out of important moments. Replaced." Jackson leaned forward. "Mom, we never intended to exclude you, but there were boundaries that weren't being respected." "Like what?" Sandra asked defensively. "Like showing up at our house without calling first," I said gently. "Or criticizing our decisions. Or telling me never to call you mother again." Sandra's face flushed. "I was upset. I didn't mean it." "But you said it," Jackson pointed out. "And it was hurtful. Just like it was hurtful when you called Amber the woman who trapped your son." Sandra looked away. "I was emotional." "We all get emotional," Paula interjected. "But words have power, especially when they come from people we love." The conversation continued tense at times, but largely civil. Sandra was clearly struggling to admit fault, directly, often deflecting with phrases like, "if you felt hurt," rather than, "I'm sorry I hurt you." But it was still progress, compared to her previous refusal to discuss the issues at all. After about an hour, Paula suggested we take a break. While Jackson went to help Paula prepare some refreshments, I found myself alone with Sandra for the first time in months. The silence between us was heavy. Sandra stared at the family photos on Paula's wall, seemingly lost in thought. "Jackson was such a sensitive child," she said suddenly. "Always worried about everyone else's feelings. Always trying to make peace." I nodded, unsure where she was going with this. "When his father died, it was just the two of us," she continued. "For 16 years, it was just us against the world." She turned to look at me directly. "And then you came along, and suddenly I wasn't the most important person in his life anymore." The raw honesty of her statement took me by surprise. "That must have been hard," I said softly. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know how to be just his mother and not his entire world." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I was afraid of losing him. I still am." In that moment, I saw Sandra clearly, perhaps for the first time. Not as a villain or a manipulator, but as a woman who had built her entire identity around being needed by her son. His independence, his marriage, his new family had all threatened that identity. "You haven't lost him," I told her. "He loves you very much. He's been heartbroken over this separation." "But he chose you," she said, a hint of the old bitterness creeping into her voice. "He chose us," I corrected gently. "His family, the one we created together. But that doesn't mean there isn't room for you too." Sandra wiped her eyes. "I don't know how to be a mother-in-law or a grandmother. I only know how to be a mother." "You can learn," I suggested. "We all can. I'm learning how to be a mother myself now." When Jackson and Paula returned with tea and cookies, they found Sandra and me in a tearful but genuine conversation about motherhood and the fears that come with it. The meeting ended with a tentative plan for Sandra to visit our home the following weekend to meet Lily for the first time. We set clear parameters, a 2-hour visit with both Jackson and me present the entire time. And I'd like you to consider coming to counselling with us, Jackson added as we were preparing to leave. Just a few sessions to help us communicate better. To our surprise, Sandra agreed to think about it. I want to be part of your lives, she said, looking at both of us. If that's what it takes, I'll consider it. The first visit was awkward, but peaceful. Sandra brought a small stuffed elephant for Lily and asked permission before picking her up a small but significant acknowledgement of our parental authority. Over the following weeks, we established a pattern of short supervised visits. There were occasional slip-ups, moments when Sandra would make a critical comment or try to take over, but she was noticeably trying to control these impulses. After the third visit, Sandra agreed to attend a counselling session with us. Dr. Martinez helped facilitate a conversation about family roles and boundaries, explaining concepts like differentiation and healthy family systems in terms we could all understand. Sandra struggled with some of the concepts, but made an effort to engage. After the session, she admitted that she could see how some of her behaviours might have been controlling. I just wanted everything to be perfect for Jackson, she explained. I wanted to protect him from making mistakes. But making mistakes is how we learn, Dr. Martinez pointed out. It's how we grow into our own lives. Sandra attended 3 counselling sessions in total. While she never fully embraced the process, the sessions provided a framework for our conversations and a neutral space to address difficult topics. The real breakthrough came 6 months after our first mediated meeting. We had invited Sandra to Lily's first birthday party, a small gathering with just family and a few close friends. During the party, one of my friends asked Sandra about her experience as a grandmother. It's not what I expected, Sandra said thoughtfully. It's better in some ways. I get to enjoy Lily without the constant worry of being responsible for her. Later, as the party was winding down, Sandra pulled me aside. I owe you an apology, she said, her voice low. A real one, not just for show or because Jackson wants it. I waited, hardly daring to breathe. I was wrong to treat you the way I did, she continued. Wrong to try to come between you and Jackson. Wrong to say you should never call me mother. She looked me in the eyes. If you still want to, I would be honoured to have you call me Mom. But I understand if that bridge is burned. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you, Sandra. That means a lot to me. I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid of being replaced, of not being needed anymore. But I see now that there's room in Jackson's life for both of us, in different ways. She glanced over at Jackson, who was bouncing Lily on his knee, making her giggle. And there's room in her life for me too, if you'll allow it. Of course, I said. She should know her grandmother. Sandra hesitated, then asked, May I hug you? I nodded, and she pulled me into an embrace that felt for the first time truly maternal rather than performative. From that day forward, our relationship with Sandra slowly but steadily improved. There were still occasional tensions and disagreements, but the underlying respect remained intact. Sandra learned to call before visiting, to ask rather than demand, and to accept our decisions about Lily's upbringing even when she disagreed. By Lily's second birthday, Sandra had become a regular and positive presence in our lives. She had found a balance between being involved without being invasive, loving without controlling. One evening, after Sandra had babysat Lily so Jackson and I could have a date night, she made a comment that showed how far she had come. Thank you for letting me be part of your family, she said as we were preparing to leave. And thank you for standing your ground when I was being impossible. Lily deserves better than the grandmother I would have been back then. As we drove home that night, I reflected on the journey we had taken. The pain and conflict had been necessary steps toward building a healthier family dynamic. By setting firm boundaries and requiring respect, we had paradoxically created more room for love to grow. Sometimes cutting ties isn't about ending relationships, but about beginning healthy ones. The hardest decisions often lead to the most healing outcomes if we have the courage to make them and the patience to see them through. I looked over at Jackson, then back at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her car seat. Our little family was stronger for having weathered the storm and now expanded to include a grandmother who had learned that love means respect, not control. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members for the sake of your own family's well-being? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect your peace. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful beginnings.